Begin with the Democrats in the House showing what they mean by a new phase in oversight of Donald Trump. House Intel Chair Adam Schiff announcing today he'll hold a public hearing next week on the counter-intel implications of the Mueller report. Powerful Oversight Committee Chair also announcing a separate vote to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress. The House is also going to hold a vote on former Attorney General Bill Barr and former White House counsel Don McGahn on Tuesday, as people want to know the implications of the Mueller report. Now, all of this that I just mentioned grows out of the Judiciary Committee, which is also going to be busy Monday with its first full obstruction hearing about the Mueller report. And that's not all. Tonight, the Judiciary Committee is starting to tell the world about more witnesses who will provide expert testimony to inform the committee, the Congress, and I guess the public about whether Donald Trump committed criminal activity in office. So in addition to Watergate counsel John Dean, the committee will hear from former U.S. Attorneys Joyce Vance and Barbara McQuade, legal experts known for their extensive prosecutorial experience. Both are also legal analysts at MSNBC. Now, the new witness announcements come as Democrats are bearing down on how and if they will ultimately make the ultimate former prosecutor testify, Bob Mueller. Now, in the meantime, Speaker Pelosi continues to dial up her rhetoric against Trump while also tamping down impeachment talk. And the president hit right back after this news that she told colleagues she would rather see Donald Trump in prison than impeached.
I think she's a disgrace. I actually don't think she's a talented person. I've tried to be nice to her because I would have liked to have gotten some deals done. She's incapable of doing deals. She's a nasty, vindictive, horrible person.
A couple points here. One, there are people concerned that Nancy Pelosi is verging on a lock him up style of attack, which would echo Donald Trump. Others point out that Donald Trump is literally the last politician in the world who can complain about that kind of political treatment. But the deeper and substantive question, which I'm about to turn to with our guests, is this. Does talking about the president's potential criminal conduct, even if supported by evidence, serve as a valid substitute for what other experts and many Democrats have said, including on this show, it's time for, which is the question of whether it is time for impeachment? I'm joined tonight by Basil Smikle, former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party and an ally of Nancy Pelosi, and Peter Dow, a progressive activist and internet specialist who served as internet director for Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign. Good evening to both of you.
Good to be here.
You know your way around these issues. Speaker Pelosi, who you support and have worked with, and you've run a state party. You are a person who's actually balanced all the interests. The New York State Party has plenty of liberals and progressives who always want to be, or often want to be confrontational. But you say Pelosi has this right.
I say right, what she's doing, you use the word tamp down, and I think that's exactly where we are. If you look at her statement a few weeks ago when she said that President Trump was goading her into impeaching, goading Democrats into impeachment, that specific word in that language sends the message to me that she's not going to just take the bait automatically, that she wants to find a way to create this narrative for the American people, not just about laying out why Trump shouldn't be in office, but doing it in a way that also protects all of those Democrats that flipped seats last year, because that's really important. If we have the ability, and if we're hearing from, and I think we are starting to hear more from those members of Congress, because they're going to be the ones that are probably the most susceptible to some of these issues.
Peter,
if they start to support this, then I think that trigger is pulled.
Okay, respectfully, and I respect you greatly, I disagree very, very strongly about this. Look, Ari, this is not a time for half measures. We are facing a threat that we've never faced before, certainly within our lifetimes. And that's an autocrat as a president, somebody who has no respect for the rule of law. So this is not a time for dithering. I don't want to impugn the integrity of Speaker Pelosi or Representative Nadler, who's been my rep for many years as a longtime New Yorker. But they are failing colossally at this point. This is a moment where we rise to the challenge, and there has to be accountability. If there is no accountability, and that means impeachment, then we are normalizing everything that has happened the past 2.5 years. Every child that was stolen from a parent, every single transgression, every time Donald Trump disgraced the office. We can't do that. It is on Democrats right now because that's where impeachment starts.
And you're making an almost moral case. Do you think the politics back you up?
I think the politics doesn't really matter. I think at this moment in history, we have to look at what the Constitution demands of us. And that is that we cannot have a lawless and corrupt president getting away with it. And every time we say we're going to wait longer, we're basically saying nothing he has done to date rises to impeachment yet, which is absurd.
So, it's interesting. I don't disagree with anything you said. And, I spent all of 2016 talking about how morally corrupt.
Let me make a joke at your expense, and then I'll let you continue.
Sure.
Spoken like an establishment Democrat.
No, not at all. I spent all of 2016.
But you do let me explain. I'm not just giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
You do disagree, and Speaker Pelosi seems to want it both ways. Prison is more severe than impeachment. She is jumping to use the rhetoric of Mr. Dow, if I can use you as a stand-in. You are an expert and a guest here. She uses Mr. Dow's rhetoric without the substance. You say you agree with Mr. Dow, but you don't.
I said I'm going to push back on your pushback because I actually don't agree with that aspect of it. I'd rather see him in prison and impeached because I don't think you can have it both ways. I think you do actually have to pull the trigger on impeachment, and you have to do it soon. My point is, I don't know that she has adequately, because she's the one that has to do this, she hasn't adequately laid out the case and created that narrative to present to the American people. Do I think it's there? Yes. But I don't think she's done it. And you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I want him in prison and I want him impeached, because what's going to happen, and you're right, what's going to happen is if we don't pull this trigger soon, what the narrative that's going to be written about us is that we are slow to the punch. We're not actually doing our job, and that's going to hurt us more than anything else. But I do understand what she's trying to do here, which is balance all of those interests. The issue is that it's probably not happening quickly enough for most.
But here's the contradiction in that point. When she's blocking impeachment, the Speaker and the House, the Dem leadership, it's not just the Speaker, because those who believe that it should be done and disagree with her, there's a little bit of a good cop, bad cop going on. Well, Representative Nadler wants it, but she doesn't want it. The fact is, AOC, Representative Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, many others, Elizabeth Warren, have said it's time for impeachment. Even a Tea Party Republican like Justin Amash can see the writing on the wall. I don't understand why Democrats actually are now politicizing it, because the more you play this back and forth, the more you're turning it into a political calculus. The fact is, just simply with, not even with Mueller, Ari, fundamentally, when a president says the Fourth Estate, the media, are the enemies of the people, right there he has violated his oath to protect and defend the Constitution, because that's a violation. That's an abuse of the First Amendment.
And Peter, are you tired of Democratic leaders saying what they stand for isn't popular rather than trying to make what they stand for popular?
I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've known you a long time. I've been fighting this fight the whole time, back from the Patriot Act, the Iraq War. The Democratic Party leadership needs to change. And I'll be perfectly frank, and I've floated this, and I'm actually seriously considering. I've been a long time Upper West Side resident of Manhattan, and I'm considering running to primary Representative Nadler. I respect him. He's been a good progressive. Yes.
I know you, but I didn't know that.
Well, and the reason is...
I mean, people would argue that Chairman Nadler, more than Pelosi, has been trying to push forward with what you're talking about.
That's what's being said. However, just like many other Democratic politicians who have been willing to step up in the House and say, look, whatever the Speaker says, I believe it should happen now. And the reason I say this, and I'm only considering it, and I'm considering it because I want to walk the talk. I can't just say we should do this if I'm not willing to.
Do you think Basil will endorse you? He usually works with the incumbent.
I like Jared.
I'm going to bring in.
It'd be hard for me to do that.
I'm going to bring in.
I'd write you a check.
I'm going to bring in a reporter. Both of you stay, but I want to bring in a reporter who has an eye on Trump world on this, Francesca Chambers, White House correspondent of the Daily Mail, back from the European trip with Donald Trump. And I want to play a little vintage Trump of why I make the point at the top of the show. And some things bear repeating. He is literally the last person who can complain about lock him up. And yet, Basil just outlined the concern that that particular point from Speaker Pelosi may not be a good idea. But take a look at the history.
She should be in prison. She should be in jail for what she did with her emails, okay? She should be in jail.
Hillary Clinton should have been prosecuted and gone to jail for what she did.
She gets special treatment under the Justice Department.
Lock her up is right.
How is the latest attack playing over in the White House based on your knowledge and reporting? And what kind of Donald Trump did we get coming back from this trip?
Well, Ari, I was there at the cemetery yesterday in the Normandy region when President Trump just went on the attack on Nancy Pelosi. And so just to give you a little bit of context about that, he had landed, he's doing this interview with Fox News, and first time he brought up Nancy Pelosi, he wasn't asked about her. The second time he brought her up, though, he had been asked about those impeachment comments, and he just said that it was disgusting, and he really let loose on Nancy Pelosi. Now, comparatively, Nancy Pelosi was also at that same exact event yesterday. She did not bring up Donald Trump, specifically when she was talking to her colleague Andrea Mitchell. And when I spoke to her, she didn't bring him up either. But I think it's worth pointing out that neither I nor Andrea Mitchell directly asked about her.
And what do you think, as a reporter who's been on the beat, what do you think of this talking point that Donald Trump's folks claim he wants to be impeached?
Well, Nancy Pelosi says that President Trump is goading Democrats toward that, but certainly President Trump and the White House believe that they can win in 2020 fair and square against any Democrat they could face, and that includes Joe Biden, who's currently seen as the front runner.
Basil?
Well, yes, Joe Biden is seen as a front runner, number one, and the polls bear that out. And there are a number of Americans that actually think Donald Trump is going to be reelected. I've talked to a lot of Democratic voters that have said that. And I think, again, that's the challenge that someone like Nancy Pelosi has. It's not necessarily me saying that I think Democrats haven't put up a good rationale thus far. But if you're going back to your earlier statement, if you're trying to manage a party apparatus, there's so many things that you have to balance, and balancing trying to elect a Democrat for the White House, trying to make sure that you hold the House where it is or gain more seats, and even try some way to flip the Senate. Those are just a lot of things to have to balance. But I do think we need to make a decision soon, quite frankly. Because if we don't,
Peter,
that's the peril for us, not making a quick decision.
And Peter, your old boss, Hillary Clinton, has largely stayed out of this.
Yeah, well, whether it's Hillary Clinton or President Obama or former President Bill Clinton, I think it's on every Democrat who has been fighting Republicans for the past 20 plus years to face up to the fact that we are losing, we are failing, and the far right is taking over this country. And I look at my own activism for 20 years, and I've been fighting the fight, but I look at myself and I say, how did we get here? We need change. We need change at the top of the Democratic Party, because we're at a point now where we have pretty much a lawless president. We have an attorney general who's a PR guy for the president. Subpoenas are being ignored. For example, it's not just impeachment, Ari. There's another thing, and you're a very good attorney yourself. They're able to actually arrest. There's the inherent contempt power where Democrats could actually arrest those who are defying subpoenas.
Right.
Use your power.
And that's been written about with marshals. Real quick.
I actually think we should start doing that, because even in the Nixon impeachment articles, not responding to subpoenas was part of the argument. And if we're not at that point, then if we're not getting that information, I actually think there should be some harsher penalties.
Right, and that's fascinating to take the temperature here, to hear your colloquy, your respectful debate at a time when, as we've been reporting, the House next week is going into the first hearings on the potential obstruction by the President of the United States. In any other world, those might be called impeachment hearings. That's not what they're calling them, and holding these contempt votes. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.